Brace yourselves. We promise it's still a Villa podcast. It's not an Arsenal podcast. It's not talk of the Arsenal, talk of the arse. It's talk of the Trinity.
Until you break down.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Talk of the Trinity podcast. I am Baz Barrett. With me is Mr. Trinity himself, Will Forrest. If you're watching the visual episode on YouTube, if we've got the camera right and you're a little worried about Will looking like he's in a cell, don't worry, he hasn't been arrested for crimes against prediction. It's just, it's just not a very inspiring room that he's in, but that is a perfect metaphor for a workplace. But the opposite of the opposite of non-inspiring is, of course, inspiring, which is exactly what this podcast is. And you can find this podcast, as I mentioned, on our YouTube channel, Talk of the Trinity, also on our audio providers, Spotify, Apple, Google, Geezer, Deezer, Squeezer, some other ones, which no doubt will come up in the recap at the end. And once you've had enough of listening or watching our visual and audio delights, you can engage with us on our Twitter page at Talk of the Trinity, where it's a long couple of weeks for international football until the Premier League gets back rocking and rolling. So no doubt we will be filling your time productively with some polls, some insights, some opinions, all of the above. So check us out on there and we look forward to hearing from you. But before we get to the main part of the podcast, just a couple of shouts out, some get well soons really to friends of the show. We missed this one before our previous podcast had been recorded, before we found out this news. Don't worry, nobody's died. But in terms of get well soon to Irish Dave, as his birth certificate says, struck down with a little known disease you may have heard of called COVID. So hopefully his isolation period has been enhanced by listening and watching to us when you literally got nothing else to do. Actually, that should have been our tagline, actually, in terms of introducing the podcast. So get well soon to Dave, and also get well soon to Mr. Aston Villa himself, Conor Sherry. Football-related injuries, which is something I can say I haven't suffered from anytime soon. So Conor getting stuck in for the Villa team that he's captaining on Sunday. Nasty concussion. So hopefully he's putting himself in the line of duty, for the cause. So get well soon, Skipper.
And that's another reason why I hate the Baggies, because it's the Baggies that did it to him. So Baggies, fuck off. There you go. Sorry.
Well, that is probably going to be a sentiment echoed by most of the people watching and listening to this episode. But unfortunately, a similar reaction to one you may just have seen my co-host if you were watching the YouTube channel, and you may not have done because I realized I hadn't set up the screens properly to begin with. So now I have. It's the perfect timing to see my co-host reaction when we talk about events that happened at Villa Park on Saturday afternoon, just gone, 12:30 kickoff. Aston Villa 0, Arsenal 1. And even though I predicted an Arsenal victory, which I'm not going to say was a Nostradamus style prediction, but even in that regard, I was pretty disappointed in terms of what I saw from Villa in the 90 minutes, which on the one hand, the main reasons I predicted Arsenal to beat Villa is because they're better than us at this time, which pains me to say. That's why I got to laugh it off, because I'm crying inside just uttering those words. And they're chasing the Champions League European places where we're a fair way off. So you'd expect the better team to win most of the time and to play better, which is exactly what happened on Saturday. But it's something you can't easily put your finger on without it coming in sounding like platitudes. And it's funny enough how Gerrard's post-match conference kind of came out in terms of basically we backed off, didn't get stuck in, especially in the first half, and we just got absolutely punished. Any positives for you watching that, Will? Or are you sharing in my slightly downhearted reaction? And also kind of what was literally going on during the game. I was pretty downhearted then, to be honest.
Well, my favourite part of the match was how Steven Gerrard had a go at the interviewer at the very end for the ridiculous questions that he asked him and told him that he thought these questions should have been better.
Well, I think his game plan should have been better, frankly, but we'll come on to that.
This is about the commentators, and these are about my favourite bits. And this is my favourite bit. It was great. I loved it. I loved the passion of Steven Gerrard. The fact that he wants us to do well. He wants us to be one of the top teams. He wants us to overtake Arsenal, Man United, Tottenham, West Ham, getting closer to them, to Wolves as well. But going on to the game itself now, I had a few things going on Saturday morning. My kids needed their eyes tested. My wife said to me, well, we can rearrange it if you want, but they have to be done. I said, okay, how many fingers am I holding up? She said, no, that's not good enough as an eye test anymore. I went, okay. I did this. I went, how many fingers am I holding up? And my son went 5. And I went, well, you definitely need your eyes tested then, because that's a fun. Anyway, we went to get the eyes tested. The queue was too long. We returned home, got back inside for the second half. Brilliant. Oh, we're 1-0 down. Saw the highlight. I thought the goal was a very poor goal to concede. Really sorry to upset you and the fans, though. If we're able to get the visuals on, and it's not just the beautiful picture that we animate, they will probably see you looking disappointed that I think that John McGinn could have done a little bit better for the goal. I think he let Saka get away from him. However, Saka had time to go and have a walk round Cannon Hill Park before we got to the edge of the penalty area.
Well, I think he had the time to go and walk around the park waiting for the ball to go in the net after going off his foot. I mean, it was exactly the most vicious effort I've ever seen.
No, and could Martinez have done a bit better? Yeah, he probably could. I mean, there are people in front of him, but it's straight down his throat, really. It's one of them where we just, from what I understand, we didn't do enough. First half, we're very passive. Second half, we came out fighting. We showed an intent to get closer to their goal. I noted that we had as many touches in their penalty box in the first 6 minutes of the second half as we had in the first half, from what the commentators said. Ollie Watkins had the effort to hit the post. Should he have tried to square it, lay it off, whatnot? Maybe, but still got his shot off, and that's why he got the England call up.
Imagine what he would have got if he would have gone in. He probably would have gone knighted.
Mate, he'd have got the keys to Cannon Hill Park, and he'd have seen Bukayo Saka there.
Yeah.
But
I'm one of those pedlos going across the lake.
That's I mean, there was definitely endeavour from a lot of the players. Ashley Young was trying to get down that left wing. Matty Cash played incredibly well again, in my opinion. I actually thought Matty Cash was our man of the match. Considering that only a month or so ago, I wouldn't have minded Atletico Madrid coming in for him for however much money. I don't want him to go now. I want us to keep good right backs like him. Conser did well. Mings, I thought, did well. Also, Dougie Luiz, thought played quite well. JJ, not his best game. John McGinn got stuck in enough. The subs didn't really do too much. Ings had the effort that looped over, which is a difficult header to take. Bailey, I think, wanted to get the ball, but just didn't get it enough. And Bertrand Traore just does a little bit too much, doesn't he, really? Fair play to Gerrard for identifying that we needed to change the system, go for that, either a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, which I think he was trying to play. But to be a negative Baz, I think he got it wrong to start with the lineup. I think it should have been a 4-3-1-2 again, for all the reasons that I said on the last podcast. Go and check them out. Coutinho didn't get into the game enough, did he? And it's been asked, can Philip Coutinho still cut it against the better teams, or is it a case of the players around him need to improve? You know, what do you reckon?
Well, firstly, in terms of the shape, the reason given by Gerrard was Ings wasn't fully fit. But then you're still in a position of, okay, if he's not fully fit, do you keep the same shape and put somebody else up front? Which it does feed into the Coutinho question, because we've talked about in previous podcasts about his impacts and how well he settled into English football after, 4 years away. It, especially in recent weeks, you could say it's a large part that is because the team was built to go through him, in terms of he's the one, as you mentioned, the one behind the strikers. It's get the ball to Coutinho. A little bit of creativity from him can open up a defense. So in terms of the shape, putting Buendia back in there negates kind of that kind of role. And especially if it was a situation that Ings was going to play, but the shape was changed late, then that's pretty late for then Coutinho to kind of change his preparation, his way of approaching the game. I mean, I'm sure the response to that would be, well, if you're a really good player, you should be able to react to that because it happens during a game. Never mind, if you get the team sheet an hour before the game to prepare. But Coutinho, I do think there is an element of you're only as good as the players around you. And in terms of, again, something we touched upon previously, in terms of the players in that starting 11, in terms of how many you are going to say will be there if Villa reach I don't want to say the promised land. I want to say the first stop towards the promised land of qualifying for Europe, being in the Europa League or the Conference League. How many of the players in that starting 11 would you say they're definitely going to be there in the Europa League in a last 16 quarter-final tie? I mean, West Ham played them last week. They beat Sevilla, who I think they won the trophy 6 times already during the course of this season, let alone in their history. So to get to, we said it previously, you want to aspire, and this again sounds really bitter coming off my tongue, but you want to aspire to be a team like West Ham, because that's the first step towards Champions League and winning trophies. A few years ago, they weren't. I mean, they were being tipped to go down kind of a few years ago. So with some canny management, you got to give Moyes credit. They wasted money, but then decided this is the type of player we want and the type of system we're going to build. And they've done that. I mean, some people may say they didn't spend enough money in January. Time will tell. But they built a team. And I think in terms of that's where Villa have to get to in the first step. And getting there is getting the players who are good enough. And you're not going to say all 11 who played on Saturday will be good enough to play in the Europa League. I don't think. And squad depth comes into it. And, you look in terms of, and this is a very easy one to pick. And you could say unfair, but I mean, Ashley Young, for example, playing at left back. I mean, he's not first choice left back, Luca Coutinho is, but he got absolutely torn apart by Saka in the first half. And I don't think you can even blame Ashley Young, because in terms of Saka, one of the brightest young prospects in English football, you looked at that lineup before the game and it wouldn't have taken a genius to go, they're going to get the ball to Saka and they're going to run it. And that's exactly what happened. And so you can't blame Ashley Young for being now like 36-year-old emergency left back going against, one of the better players in the league. Where he is, I'm sure that's a debate for another day. But that was, I think it was almost inevitable that was going to happen. I mean, in terms of how it could have been counteracted with other changes in the shape, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we won't go on too much about that because the reality is, the game's gone, we lost. But after that delightful meander through Cannon Hill Park, going back to the original question about Coutinho, if it half full column came on against Man United, tore them apart in 20 minutes. Negative column didn't do much against Arsenal. You got to look in terms of influence in the last couple of games as Wayne. But I think Coutinho sums up performances over the last few weeks. Some at where Villa are at the moment. Some weeks up there, some weeks down there. Very inconsistent. I mean, and that's in terms of the Arsenal game on Saturday. In a microcosm, really. We haven't very often been able to put together a 90 minutes of being able to put it on the tape and go, yeah, this is how we want to play. 90 minutes, start to finish. Dominate the opposition in the way we want to play. It's accommodate. Coutinho fits into that. He can't do it on his own. The system, is it that the system, the players aren't quite used to it yet? Maybe, maybe not. Is it that the players aren't good enough to play the systems that Gerrard want to play? Probably in terms of the demands. So I think for Coutinho, and you know, this is maybe a bit Kevin Keegan style of management, but if you surround him with better players, he'll have more influence on a game. And you mentioned in terms of some of the players on Saturday and you review their performances, like Jacob Ramsey. Yeah, not his best game. I mean, are you going to get too upset about it in the grand scheme of things? Not really. He's a young player. He's going to learn, but he's been playing well in tandem with Coutinho. So they've both kind of been you'd arguably say they are better players in the last month or so. So Ramsey has an off day. Okay, so that affects Coutinho. Begin. I thought he actually played quite well, actually. You'd be surprised. But why I think he played quite well is probably for the reasons you already picked in terms of he got stuck in, he got around, which shouldn't elevate a player up to thinking they played really well if they just got stuck in. Because in terms of, I'm not a football manager, but if I was going to be on the first rung of football management without any tactical knowledge at all, kind of, I would say, you know, Timmy tactics, which you would vehemently disagree with. The one thing you'd expect from a game against Arsenal would be, okay, we're not as good as these. Just get stuck in. You know, in terms of, let's get pressure on the ball, see what happens. I mean, you saw at the full-time whistle how much the game meant to Arsenal. And for what it's worth, I think that's I've talked about where Villa are. I think that sums up where Arsenal are, you know, and I think I'm not going to criticise them too much for that. I mean, which is, I love criticising Arsenal, but they're a team who haven't qualified for the Champions League for however many years it is. And it took Villa got to get that first step, getting into Europe. Arsenal, their next step, getting in Champions League. And if they get in the Champions League, if they come fourth, I mean, teaser for our Premier League predictor episode coming up during the international break. Do we think they will or not? That is an achievement for Arsenal, fair play. And pundits saying, oh, you know, you're celebrating like you won the league. I mean, to Arsenal, getting in the Champions League is like winning the league. That's where they are at the moment because they haven't come forth for a while. They're nowhere near winning the league. So you got to start somewhere. So, and that's what Villa got to do, start somewhere. Bringing it back to Coutinho, we started somewhere, getting him in. You got to build around him and the quality. Am I worried that he maybe hasn't got it? Well, hopefully a few more performances like that. I mean, his price might drop so we can get him for a little cheaper without any competition come the transfer window. But I think his performance reflects where the team is, also reflects where the manager is. I mean, you mentioned in terms of changing the tactics in the second half, maybe an admission that didn't set up in the right formation. If you're being harsh, you're saying the manager didn't have the perfect 90 minutes because in terms of he sent the team out in the wrong shape. So it's where the club is. Everybody is in that inconsistent stage. You need to, if you think Gerrard's the man, which I think most people do, as we said before, give him the summer, give him the chance to get better players in. And then if we're still having the same conversations this time next season, if we spend 150 million or whatever we might spend in the transfer window, that's when you have a real look at it and go, oh, hang on, I'm not really sure this is going to be working here. But Coutinho, not worried too much. It's where we are ultimately. And I think in terms of, you could tell, frustrating performance all round, bringing it to Gerrard, that interview you mentioned. How many interviews have you watched after the game where you thought that the interview has gone, oh, that is a fantastic, really insightful question. I mean, he's really getting to the heart of the issues. I never would have thought looking about it that way. None. They're all really anodyne off a script. If you lose, you're not going to be happy with that, are you? Oh, what went wrong? There was nothing in the questioning which I thought warranted the reaction, because that's the type of standard of post-match journalism you get. Because ultimately, if you do have a hard-hitting journalist going in, going, oh, we're talking about shape, for example, going, oh yeah, I don't think the shape was right. That managers would go, well, sod this. I'm not here to be criticised by you. You're not managing the team, and nobody would want to do post-match interviews. So, I think it symbolised the frustration Gerrard was feeling about how the game went, which is fair enough. I mean, in terms of comments about Saka, I mean, our game plan was to kick him, and Gerrard said, you shouldn't complain about being kicked. If that was the other way around and we'd won the game away at arrival and had our young Jacob Ramsey kicked all over the park, we'd be saying exactly the same thing as Saka was saying in terms of...
Yeah, but we're allowed to.
Well, it's a great thing about losing. There's no such, sour loser, sour grapes. There's a saying for that. So we can go. Sour winner doesn't quite have the same taste, quite literally. But I think, Gerrard's performance in the post-match interview reflected the performance on the day. It was, it's just frustrating.
I loved his performance. And I think the other thing, though, when you think about it and you think about the performance and the effect it had on his interview, it probably didn't help that the streamers from the Arsenal celebrations were still in his hair and messed his barnet up, because they did go mad for it, didn't they? And I get what you're saying. You want your teams to be happy that they've won, that they've managed to get that hard-fought victory. It goes to show where we are, that they're so happy that they managed to scrape a win against us, really, because, to be honest, they did scrape a win, really, in regards to the scored line and that last-minute free kick save. So that paints us in a good light, really. I loved the interview. I really, really did.
In terms of
my expectations, and I'm going to take a soundbite from it and get it tattooed on my arse with a picture of him.
In terms of, if I was to make the flippant example, when we stayed up on the last day and beat West Ham, we celebrated on the pitch like we won the league, and we come 17th. And pundits called us out at the time. I was like, go and celebrate. That is an achievement for Villa staying up. It's an achievement for Arsenal to come forth, if they do come forth. And I agree in terms of it. They identified this game as a potential threat because they'd lost the last couple of times they've been to Villa Park. So that is credit to us in a sense. But
yeah, I think without going round the houses too much on it, you're right. The pundits did have a go at us. The difference being is that when we drew 1-1 with West Ham, it was a definitive result of we have now stayed up, and staying up after what we've done. I personally think the greatest escape ever in Premier League history, and I'm not being biased, it's because we had those 4 games and we had a couple of hard teams in there. Having that celebration on the last day, fair enough, you've stayed up, you managed to do it. Arsenal at the moment are still, they've got about 8 games in hand, so they're still like 43 games off finishing their season. They haven't finished 4th yet. When they finish 4th, if they want to celebrate on the pitch by doing cartwheels, grabbing the corner flag and whipping it round and, helicoptering the fans, fair enough. It was a little bit OTT, but when we do it next week after beating Wolves away, then I'm not going to point the finger at anyone.
Yep, and that's fair enough in terms of they haven't come forth yet, so save it till the end of the season.
You're an Arsenal fan now. You're a closet Arsenal fan. Don't you dare say anything naughty about my gorgeous Gooners.
It makes me sad. It really is, in terms of, I think I in the preview, go listen to the preview in terms of my thought about Arsenal. I think I'll make myself sick if I have to repeat the positive words I said. I think the sad thing about Saturday is I don't think Arsenal had to play particularly well to beat us. And I think that is the most frustrating part, in terms of you can go and have a good game and still lose. And you can think, yeah, we really gave them a challenge there. I don't think we did. And I think in terms of, we had even then, you mentioned in terms of, we hit the post, we had a header which kind of hit the top of the net. We had a free kick at the end. Sometimes you only get those one chance, like you can have another game where one of those chances we take and you win 1-0 and you think, oh God, that's the best performance. You know, what a great kind of defensive back to the wall effort, get a result. The fact we had 3 decent chances and kind of left a bit cold, kind of thinking we're still crap. I think sums up kind of the tempo that the game was approached, especially in the first half. I mean, in terms of, you regaled us earlier with your insights into domestic bliss on Saturday and where you were watching some of the game. I went to a local drinking establishment to enjoy some adult beverages, and I was accompanied with my significant other as well, who, safe to say, was not quite as interested in what was going on as I was. So we were sat in this seat to begin with by the window, so the sunshine. So, you know, she can enjoy the sunshine. You know, I mean, it doesn't take much. But I had to request that we moved because I couldn't see the screen because of the sun beating on the screen. And then when we moved, it's like, oh man, I preferred the other seat because I couldn't see what was going on, and that was much more preferable to what I was seeing, especially in the first half. But I think it's the basics weren't. You talk about this in terms of my performance on Saturday as well in the drinking establishment, was didn't do the basics right, caused problems throughout the rest of the game, couldn't quite rebuild that momentum, even though we did have a better second half performance. And it's an interesting point I was pondering in terms of mentioning, we beat Arsenal last couple of seasons at home. So if you're doing the 2 + 2 = 5 thinking, oh, we must be a worse team now because we beat them then and we didn't now. It doesn't work like that in practice, of course, but we had the flying start to the season last year, where the 1 month where Barkley was fit and we had Grealish and Watkins was flying. Was that team in that moment, I mean, the highlight, of course, 7-2 against Liverpool, was that team in that moment better than the team we got now?
Oh, on paper, no, not at all. I actually think from a potential point of view, no, I don't think so. I think we're in a better position now. I can see what you're saying. You know, the Liverpool result, I don't think the amount of goals he scored was potentially a bit fluky and a bit freaky because they took a few deflections, you know, but they all count. I think we'd have still beat them, you know, we'd have beaten 4-2 if all the deflections didn't count. I actually think we're in a better position now. And you mentioned, are we worse than we were because we lost to Arsenal? No, that's only a question that you're posing. I think you look at the game plans, and the first season when Trezeguet scored that wonder volley from the corner, and then I remember this because I was around yours watching it, and Saka or somebody hit the post and going, oh, bloody hell, oh, shit. And you running out in from the kitchen with your pinny on going, oh my God, what have I missed?
Yep, but buns were nearly done by that point.
Yeah, they were. Lovely turkey cob. But there we go. And then last year, it was a bit backs against the wall, really. You know, Arsenal had a great chance with that Xhaka free kick that Martinez made, one of the saves of the season. They were defensive displays, really. Whereas now we're on the front foot a little bit more. And I know we tend to win more matches when we have less possession. Strange. We are taking the games to teams a lot more, or we have been recently, you know, especially with that 4-3-1-2. So I think we're in a better position now. I mean, Jack Grealish, Matty Cash will have him in his pocket. We'll see that on the last day of the season. Anyway, Ross Barkley, yeah, we did all right, but I'd much rather have Emi Buendia or Philip Coutinho over them. The first start of the season, as much as I love him, and I hate to make Martinez Dance Dave feel any worse than he already does, but Jacob Ramsey's showing that he's got a lot more potential than Conor Hanrahan had in the Premier League. You know, it's one of those. I think that we are better. We're better equipped, and I feel that we've got a stronger manager as well. And you look at the strike force, for example. Would you rather have Ollie Watkins up front on his own, which we had on Saturday, or would you rather have Danny Ings and Ollie Watkins up front together playing the way they have, even if they haven't both been scoring, they've been causing problems or setting up goals? And for me, the way forward now is playing that 4-3-1-2 as much as possible, looking at who we can bring in to make the personnel that start better, and looking at players and thinking, do we actually need these ones as much anymore, you know? And you'd probably be looking at Bertrand Traore. You may be looking at Leon Bailey, though, going back to a point you made earlier, stick with the same formation and chuck Leon Bailey up front. He'd have loved running onto through balls against that Arsenal defence. But no, I think you stick with what you've got and you try and build on that. And leads me nicely onto, if we do have 150 million to spend and we spend 30 million on Philippe Coutinho or 40 million, whatever's rumoured, how happy are you if we go and splash the 60 million on Calvin Phillips, which is popping up in the press at the moment? Is he worth 60 million? Again, it's a case of how much is a player worth to a team. We had that with Grealish. West Ham have had it with Rice, and we've mentioned that many times. Someone saying about injuries that Phillips is getting a lot at the moment, but can they be accredited to the fact that they're muscle injuries rather than shin splints, for example? And it's due to the amount of running that he's had to do for Bielsa without getting much rest, and also playing all summer long in the Euros. I think that 60 million on Phillips isn't a bad price, to be honest with you. Won't pay any more than that, I don't think, from a Villa fan point of view, not from a Leeds, this is what he's worth to us point of view. But someone like Calvin Phillips, you bring him in and Philippe Coutinho on permanent transfers, and those are two massive statements of intent. But Gerrard has then got to deliver European football.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit the point perfectly in terms of, a figure of 60 million has been put on Phillips's head. It's not in so much nowadays, is he, objectively worth 60 million? It is he worth 60 million to your team, in terms of, is he going to be playing there in 5 years' time, in the sense of that midfield when we've got European nights at Villa Park, and is he going to be bossing the midfield then? If you look at it that way, in terms of, you would pay 60 million. If it was Coutinho, Phillips, that's your 100 million, that's it. Money's gone. Make do with the rest. Would I then spend 60 million on Phillips, or would I look at splitting that money into 30 million on one, 30 million on another player to try and improve two areas of the team that need it? It's an interesting question, that one. And I think my gut is I would take the two players, because you look in terms of, Saturday, for example, Coutinho was on the pitch. If Phillips was in that midfield, would it have drastically affected the result? No, because I think there's other areas that could do with him. There's too much needing to be improved all over the pitch for us to be able to say we can step on Arsenal. And I do think we're, as we've illuminated previously, I think we're 3 or 4 players short. So you're expecting Gerrard to be like a real master coach in terms of elevating people's levels if he's limited to just, in effect, bringing one player in. Because if you're going to take Coutinho, already has a Villa player, which of course he isn't, but he's for the second half of the season, his first choice, and then Phillips coming in. It's the case of wanting your cake and eating it. I'd have Phillips, and I'd want more players. So I think we need more players. But in terms of, is that one player is getting Phillips in the midfield on its own enough to get us into Europe? I don't think it is. I mean, there's no easy answers to that. I mean, I was disappointed to see there was a story on the BBC Sport website this morning about Hickey. It's like, well, God, his reputation's now gone up sufficiently out of Villa's price range now. That's a shame. He's obviously back at that next level. Whether we do kind of follow I'd say maybe the Leicester approach, for example, of buying younger, under the radar players for like 20, 30 million. So they're not like unproven and terrible. They're just not maybe playing in the top leagues and the top competitions.
Like a Tielemans.
Yeah, and also they've had Ndidi. I mean,
Kante.
Yep, Daka.
Yeah.
Arguably, you could say Pereira, but I'd say he's quite well known. But they've got players who weren't, playing at no disrespect to where they were playing, a very, very top level. Good scouting system in place, knew they'd improve the team. And then if somebody potentially came in with an offer, you look to sell. Although Leicester, funnily enough, in the summer where they didn't have to sell any players, is a season where they've struggled the worst kind of the following season. Do we look to do it that way in terms of spreading the money in that manner? And that's an interesting, fun debate. No doubt we will continue to have. But Phillips is the statement. It'd be a statement signing, but yeah,
I think he's enough. And I know that sounds a bit typical Villa fan, but I honestly do. It'd be interesting to see, as you say, what the YouTube fans and what the Twitter fans say. But when you look at it as Phillips and Coutinho coming in, and you're playing a 4-3-1-2, you've got your goalkeeper, who's your first choice goalkeeper. You don't need to really worry about a backup too much.
Yep. I know where you're going. I'm going to throw the torpedo in there and run away before you get there. Right, would your answer be the same if Matt Cash goes, or if McGinn goes, or Watkins, or even just one of the players, not necessarily all of them?
Okay.
Would Phillips be enough then?
Well, you've got the money generated from the sale of those players as well, haven't you? So it's a bit of a cop out. I think from a Matty Cash point of view, you've got Gilbert and Kessler. From a centre back point of view, we've got those three that are potentially first choice now. Left back, Luca Dean, and I told him Ben Crishen should have started, but you've got Younger and you've got Crishen. You bring in Phillips, you've got two backups for him, Nakamba and Louise. And if McGinn goes, you've got Sanson if he sticks around, Louise, JJ who can all play there. You've got kids who are on the bench. You've got Iro Egbenham, Carney Chukwuemeka. You've got Coutinho and Buendia. The only other position that we're probably a little bit light on is up front, but I think Cameron Archer comes back next year and starts taking a place for a start. So I think even if we sell someone, we should be okay, unless it's a striker. I mean, if it's Danny Ings, I'm done with football. But I think otherwise we're okay. And we've had the McGinn debate in the pub before with Dave. Someone came in for 50, 60 million with McGinn. I'd sell him for that much because it's a massive profit, and you can use the majority of that to go and get Calvin Phillips and then go and get somebody else who's probably better than.
This would be my leading question, and I think you've just answered it.
Okay.
McGinn out of this team, Phillips in. Would you take that?
No, I actually wouldn't, because I do think that McGinn offers a lot more at the moment than Douglas Luiz would as a number 8. So if it was a case of McGinn sold and we were able to get in Phillips, and, for example, we went and splashed the cash on a player who's winding down their contract and is probably going to be up for sale, and you could actually attract them to the club in a Tielemans or a Bissouma, yes, I'd take that. But if it meant McGinn going and it's not replacing him, then no, I wouldn't. You're breathing a sigh of relief there, I can tell.
Yeah, I mean, I did think it'd just be the sight of you just going to get your car keys and saying, "I'll drive him to the airport." If that's, I mean, you haven't even booked him on a flight. It's just to you're going to pick up Phillips on the way, so you're just going to them again. But I think it demonstrates in terms of there's players who can come into the team and make a difference. but it's in terms of there's a few places I think that we need. And in terms of if we keep our best players and we don't make any sales in the summer, 1 or 2 in, yeah, we will be a better team. It's going to be an interesting summer. And in terms of the point I was like Yogi Bear sneaking in for that picnic basket before when I set you up in terms of saying the results from last season, the team from last season, as opposed to this season. I think it was the point that came to my mind is we're at the stage of the season, the stage of this team's development, whereby individual results and individual games aren't the most important thing to judge progress and where this team is going. It's performance. And last season, yeah, we had those results in isolation, very good. But, you know, a year down the line, Dean Smith was out, you know, in terms of we're not going to debate that decision again. But it didn't set the team up for, there's all sorts of different reasons. So Grealish, Barkley got injured, you know, etc. But it's nice to have those results in isolation. But in terms of the next step, it ultimately was a bit of a false dawn. Or, well, say false dawn. It's more just when you got that little peek through the curtains and you think it's sunny and you're like, oh no, it's raining. So I think in terms of the rest of the season, it's the performance that is the most important, and in terms of how well Gerrard is getting his ideas across, which is why I think in terms of Saturday was a bit disappointing in terms of it just didn't look like progress. But we've got that flexibility, freedom almost to say, and again, not prejudging what is going to be happening in our Premier League predictor show. So there could be a few curveballs, but I will say I don't, and this is going to be a real swerve because Will would have to be the most negative person to out negative Baz for what I'm about to say would be unbelievable. But I'm not predicting Villa to go down. So in terms of, I mean, we've already won the Champions League in Will's predictions. Spoiler alert. But when you have that, it's freedom in a way. You're not going down. You're not in a cup competition. You can almost begin to build for next season. And we've already speculated wildly in terms of is Calvin Phillips or anybody else going to be a part of that. But I think we need to take advantage of the situation we're in, whereby there's less pressure in terms of results, but there's more pressure in terms of is Gerrard able to demonstrate the rest of the season and the summer that he is the person to take Villa forward to where the board want this club to go, which is Europe, Champions League in the next few years. But speaking of places where you want to go, we've taken you through Arsenal. We moved away from Arsenal fairly quickly, you know, in terms of it wasn't very good. We're going to carry on the positivity, end on a happy note, say congratulations to Tyrone Mings, Ollie Watkins being called up to the England squad for the next couple of friendly games. We're based about the Premier League, so we'll dip our toes into the international waters now and again, but we are using the international break to delve into the rest of the Premier League, and we will be delivering our prediction special in terms of all the big issues and our thoughts on what is still to be decided in the Premier League. Who's going down? Who's qualifying for Europe? Who's going to win the league? We're going to throw in a few other things along the way. Will's already told me he's got a hot tip in terms of managers sacked at the end of the season. Before the end of the season, you know, we're going to probably throw in a few previews of some big games coming up. Maybe we'll even look at the Championship in terms of who is, we think, going to be promoted at the end of the season. Not Blues. So I think that does bring us to the end of our journey through footballing waters for this week. As alluded to there, we will be back with you shortly. But in the meantime, check us out on our YouTube channel, Talk of the Trinity, our Twitter page, @Talk Trinity, if you dare, based on some of the polls that are no doubt going to be going up as a result of our meanderings during the course of this episode. Audio versions available on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Geezer, Deezer, some other ones. The other ones must really love me referring to them as the other ones derogatively. We're also on FanHub, so check us out on there. And if you find us on some other places, Good for you. We're pleased. We're pleased that our spread is increasing by the day. And speaking of, actually, no, I won't go there because it would have sounded quite bad, but I will avoid digging myself into a hole and just pass over to my co-host, Will Forrest, for his final thoughts. But from me, thanks for listening and hope you survived the international break.
Once again, thank you for listening or watching, whether you just watched a motion still picture for however long we've been chatting for. That's appreciated. Whether you've been listening on one of the many channels, that's great. Don't forget to check us out on www.theotherones.com/Talk of the Trinity. Great podcast hosting site, as Baz pointed out before. Looking very, very forward to doing the Premier League predictions podcast. As you already know, Baz is going to predict Arsenal to win the league. I've said the Villa, so listen out for where the other 19 teams are going to be placed and which 3 come up from the 23 that could in the Championship. Until next time, though, cheers, Tar. Thank you very much. He's Arsenal till he dies. I'm Villa till I die. Up the Villa.